Okay, where to begin? How to start this video? What to say exactly? Okay, uh, number one, between Gary and me, there is a third party up in Canada that has apparently fed Gary some information about his personal impact on me. And that being filtered through her has, her imbued vantage point of who it is I am and her perception of my vulnerabilities and my past behavior and the influence that individuals can have upon me. This has all been relayed in some correspondence to Gary, and I wish Gary would just address me specifically when he's saying certain things and trying to, appease her and step around certain things so that he can actually address me and not worry that the impact on me is going to be a tremendous blow or it's going to cause me to flip out, damage myself. I have my own masochistic mannerisms and my own stuff going on. So whatever she's conveying, I just wish she'd address me specifically if what it is I'm saying has any particular consequence or any reaction in you, whereas it pertains to arguments about anti-natalism, ethicalism, or so forth, because it would just be nice to know. Okay, with that being said, what to say? I mean, my last video, kind of tongue-in-cheek, I do promote businesses and make this side income, and thought, well, I haven't really brought anyone else, haven't shown anyone here that, so there'll probably be a link below of this very video inside, encased in that video, if anyone's interested in how that sideline business works. In any case, what do I want to say? Deterministic one, poodlesusan, Gary, my misery and me. Who else? The group, I guess foreverwolffilms, so forth. The microcosm that is the anti-natalist community. I have brought about several arguments in contention with certain base claims, and I've revised the arguments, and I've kept putting forth other contentions, and all of it is to show a grand magnitude, a volume of magnitude of human consideration and of possibilities of thinking and manners of thought. And, some of this has come down to, such as I claim, in certain cases, it is fair to say that suffering is not bad, that pain is not bad. Okay. I've also said there is no imposition argument. There is no imposition. Procreation does not impose unless one is using it poetically. So in that case, one can use it this way, but that there's a certain, as Anton would say, a smuggling in of this notion of burden into the way anti-natalists are using the word imposition, to smuggle in the word suffering and apply it to that, when procreation, imposing, as it said, has no suffering, that the suffering, once again, comes from the world after you're already there. So there was that argument. I've been accused of verbal gymnastics because I am showing a voluminous set of argumentation around that, of consideration through that, trying to extract, push and pull, reconnect. So those are crux arguments. They're at the crux of things in a certain way. And Gary keeps insisting that there is, of all the humans on the planet, where is the argument? Where is the argument? When he himself has done a lot of negotiating and a lot of trying to refine his stance. And in doing so, he has found a dogma and a reiteration. I mean, think of everything that everybody does in life. Think about what it is they're good at. Gary found this thing that he's very good at, and he's not going to let it go, even in the midst of Luddite Return's hedonic argument, of Zombie Picture Show and myself argument about whether suffering is bad or pain is bad, and how a single individual relates to this pain. And as Professor Anton had called it, a crypto-religious argument. And I see this now as a perpetuation of a dogmatic stance. The dogmatic stance is the echo that the anti-natalists continue to perpetuate, using a reasonability that they have found that is seemingly cohesive in most manners. So granted that, but it's also planular. It's not voluminous. It's one plane, kind of like in Superman 2, the villains floating around on a single plane in outer space. That is the anti-natalist. They're caught in this single plane. So they don't see different human considerations, different considerations in general about how it is anti-natalism. There's more to be sought after. Okay, such as the argument about justification for procreation. Whatever is thrown at the anti-natalist as justification is boiled down by the anti-natalist. And for the most part, I'm going to refer to Gary, but this is expressed through the other ones as well. That the desire, or the justification for procreation is no justification at all. There is no reason at all, or there is no rational reason at all. So they'll import ration there. Okay, now in a couple of videos ago, I'm mulling over the topic and I say, yes, the ladder of logic at one point is kicked away and you are left with language. And this brings up my scope. And I've been at this for a couple of years now. I did a reduction of Gary's quad, consumption, reproduction, cannibalism, addiction, all into singular animation. All that is reduced into singular animation. But Gary insists on expanding animation, the very act of our moving as, molecules and atoms amongst each other, and biology in the world, and amongst culture and so on, in all of this change, which is the animation, which is what we say is life. Gary insists that the quad be brought out and defends it as this is more descriptive. So once again, another dogmatic field, quad, to lay down in order to continue an argumentation process. a very planular argumentation process. Why is this, I ask? Does somebody as educated as Zombie Picture Show and Luddite Returns and Professor Anton and myself, even Barklord, or to be serious, kind of on the outskirts of this, and many others. Sorry if I've interacted with you in the past and you've engaged this or you've moved around it, even conference report. You know, some people are staying out of it. You know, they're on the periphery. They may talk about it topically. Okay, so anyway, what I'm trying to say is that this notion. Let me say this. Logic, in the process of deconstruction, reading Derrida, reading Wittgenstein, reading philosophies of language, Chomsky, and so forth, these are pretty high-level, very sophisticated philosophers. And a lot of people can't make heads or tails out of them. Bring in a lot of Nietzsche, bring in Kant or Plato, for that matter, whatnot. But Derrida and Wittgenstein, very sophisticated authors. So deconstructionism comes from Derrida, and that's the whole idea of where you take dichotomous, which I'll say culturally imbued notions, dichotomies, and you fold them into singularities. And of course deconstruction, kind of like the word surrealism, has been taken to mean destruction, or it's taken to take on different meanings in casual conversation the way that it's used. But the way I brought Gary's quad down to animation was a deconstructive process showing what is nested into what. And so talking about psychology and biology, and saying, is psychology, the deconstructive questions that you go through are, is psychology a type of biology, or is biology a type of psychology? Well, if you're a spiritualist, you believe that we are spirits moving through a material experience, you might say that that biology is a type of psychology, that we are a solipsistic mind moving throughout this experience. But if you're more grounded, skeptical, atheistic, separate the notion of that, look at the physics of things, you might say, and for the sake of this argument, I will say psychology is a type of biology. We're humans. We have cross-cultural, we have communications via language. And so it's kind of like the idea, is synthesis a type of nature, or is nature a type of synthesis? Right? And so, once again, if you're spiritual, you know, a creationist, you might say that nature is a type of synthesis brought on by God. God created us. This is a human consideration. But for the sake of argument, I will stick to the realm of saying that synthesis, that which is synthetic, that which is manually created, not by a happenstance of what we would say nature, like geological, biological facts, you know, we say that psychology is a type of biology. Now, I bring this up because of the deterministic one, and this continual argument that humans don't have a biological desire to procreate, but a psychological desire to procreate. Now, once again, here is another dichotomy: psychology, biology. And so when we deconstruct the two to find out what the source is, what the monism is, I call it monism to bring into one, the monad. Which one is which? Well, psychology, I say, is a type of biology. And so us humans being able to forecast into the future, see it, see consequence, see cause and effect, know that this causes that, we can then backtrack, realign, re-engage, and say one has desire to procreate. And I say to parallel it, to pinch it together, to pinch biology as dominant over psychology and desire together. So desire and biology, pinch it together here. Now, why do I say that? Okay, the anti-natalist pinches together and holds very tightly on the pain is bad, suffering is bad. They pinch badness and pain, or suffering and pain together, or suck, if you will. They maintain and reiterate this idea of life is suck. You know, okay, so they've got this funneling drain that brings them into this notion that life is suck. They're not seeing the opposing the mirror of that tornado up above. They're once again planular and not voluminous in their considerations. Their very scope of consciousness is very narrowed. Okay, and so so they pinch pain and badness together in this area, and then over in the area between psychology and biology, they don't want to make a monad between the two, so they separate those two out. Now, I will say that dichotomies, according to Derrida, that we are imbued with cultural facts. And these facts allow dichotomies to occur within the language. Okay? So the anti-natalists will pinch together pain and badness here, and over there they'll separate psychology from biology. But that dichotomy is culturally imbued. It's imbued from the language. But one would say these distinctions, these distinctive properties, are reasonable and rational and hence correct. But these are also scientifically, culturally historic movements that created these distinctions between that which is of the mind and that which is of the being. You rarely get an anti-natalist that talks about being, a sense of singularity of self, an isness. And so for years I've been trying to drive home this notion of isness. And it seems, as far as relating, Luddite Return related a little bit, but Zombie Picture Show and I are on the same page. There is an isness. Okay, and so I bring this up because there's this stigma brought on by poodlesusan, right? Where there's suicide in her family, siblings died, and that somehow this would be made a lesser of a burden or of a hell or of a stigma if culture would change. And I argued before that Gary is a law-abiding citizen. He believes the law. He believes in the cultural mandate inherited. He's not there to break it. Same thing with poodlesusan. Somehow a stigma, kind of like on abortion, a stigma about abortion, there is a stigma about suicide, and that if the culture, aka the language that we share within this culture, would release the stigma of suicide and just allow people to die with grace, die of their own hand, and not have it be stigmatized, that would somehow release this burden that is held. Now, granted, I'm not into her mind, and this is not her argument. This is my projection and extraction of an idea. But once again, so here's this culturally inherited, lingually historic inherited notion of a stigma of suicide that has been brought about. But instead of moving and just simply ignoring that stigma, moving against the grain, causes, some psychological frustration, because it's very psychologically damaging to move against the current of history and to move against the flow, to move against the grain of culture. That's why there's culture clashes. That's why there's clashes of difference. Okay, but my point in bringing that up is that culture and language imbues these stigmas, and it brings forth these dichotomies. And so there is a notion of where one is released from it, where one is with it and one where is going against it. So this argument that was brought on has been perpetuated about suicide, that the anti-natalists, if life is so bad, should simply commit suicide. Now, this was kind of considered, once again by Gary, as, hey man, there's a lot of suffering that would go in, that's involved in the individual that would commit suicide. There's also the leftover suffering of everybody bounded via the same culture. But when one compares a synthetic suicide, or a synthesis of one's own death, as opposed to a nature of one's own death, to agree one will die, and that by dying, just the simple act of dying, naturally, by dying, one will cause suffering in those around them, culturally, lingually, emotionally. However, we're bound emotionally to our culture and through the notion of, death acceptance, and where we sit psychologically, solipsistically, with our being relative to the loss, separation, eternal separation from somebody, so to speak. And so the idea here, hopefully not to lose my train of thought, is that the natural death is going to cause this outside pain, but the stigma of a synthetic death, a suicide, is going to add more suffering somehow to the people around them. Okay, and so this is considered layered. This is what I meant by they have a point. There is a planular point to that argument, but it's not a voluminous point. It doesn't consider the idea that, psychologically speaking, simply losing somebody is suffering and maybe as traumatic or more traumatic than if the individual committed suicide. Yet somehow this notion that one takes their life at their own hand through the stigma causes this problem. This notion that there's greater suffering if one commits suicide. Okay. Anyway, like color theory, reds, yellows, blues, whites, and blacks. Between whiteness and blackness in art, there is considered a value difference. However, you change the value of any color through the black-white spectrum axis of a voluminous notion of color and color theory is a change of value. High flute notes, the piccolo, is a delightful sound. If you look at, like, 100 years ago, there was 19th century, this stigma, once again a culturally inherited historic stigma, against very low tone, very dramatic tones, low tuba, baritone, very scratchy, very harsh, very irritating sounds, and that low note is a value relative through a spectrum up to the piccolo. But there's all these instruments. There's all these ways to play instruments. There's all these sounds of all these instruments. And that creates this whole voluminous 360 square, very voluminous library of sounds that one can express themselves through, or that music is found in, or that we hear in our lives. But the notion of scaling, of value through this, one can have emotions with themselves. If their body is irritated and scratchy and full of pain, we consider that a lower value, a darker value, a blacker value than if one is elated and balanced and harmonious and happy. So there's this gradation of values, but then there's the notion that this low dark value, once again, there's a history of music and of art, lowbrow art, modern hardcore punk music, things that we just accept now, heavy metal, that are historic, that have moved humanity. I mean, if you think of Wagner's music from way back when, that caused a huge emotional uproar and social uproar and upheaval and liking and disliking, which Beethoven and Mozart did not work with. And neither of them worked with music like hardcore punk, or Metallica, or a number of bands, a number of genres that humanity has moved through to kind of shuffle off the notion that these tonalities are negative, that they are in fact bad. And in that same light, one's body shifting, aggregated, in hell, in bone breakage, in spinal carnage, is not a bad. These are cultural, lingual, medical notions, descriptions, trying to get at one's solipsistic experience. But, once again, in my greatest pain, I was as calm as ever and was rational, talkative, and not expressing that pain. And the pain, nevertheless, was there, but the mind continued on, kind of like in Fight Club, burning the back of the hand. The reason people can involve themselves in heavy, violent activities or get through warish things and not have that complication as being something that they would necessarily say is bad. So once again, it's the anti-natalist that is pinching together that value and requiring, if you are to have a discussion with them, you must agree with the premises. And so for the last some time, I have been picking and plucking away at the premises to show that one does not necessarily have to abide by them. Same thing with imposition. Imposition, moving through and out of a womb, is not an imposition. Moving through one's growth in a womb and out into the world is not an imposition. The imposition starts from the world, and mostly that is even taken care of. So this notion that if you have ALS or ASL, I'll make the same problem that deterministic, not knowing which one. Lou Gehrig's disease. Any disease, fibromyalgia, very painful. You get to a point, or if you're completely dilapidated, there's people that have no bodily structure. I mean, there's people that everybody is absolutely positively different from one another. Yet they're common, but the point is they're different from one another. The language, the culture, the language brings the stigma. It brings the difference. It brings the value. Everybody keeps saying the value. The anti-natalist argument is the value. The currency of value is in pain. It's in sentient pain. But no. The language has us. It imports and imbues value systems, value separations. The language does this. The culture does this. The isness of each different being, the isness of their uniqueness still is an isness. Meaning they are. In whatever degree of experience, whether one says it's painful or pleasurable or awkward or dizzy or fun or blah, 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 you know, infinitely weird descriptions, you know, one can say, you know, that that everybody is different. Everyone's having a unique experience, but they're traversed by language through and through that causes them to cease to see notions, to see the grain. What's acceptable, what's not acceptable, what's good, what's bad, what's here, what's there, what's likable, what's ideal, what's not ideal. It's the language that does that. The currency, the value currency, is not in sentient pain. That once again is another dogma of the anti-natalists. These are imbued notions that is inherited via our language capabilities. That's another fundamental premise. Once again, Gary will not address in a voluminous way any real consideration. It's kind of like, does Gary like his own face, or does he hate it? Right? Do you hate it? Is it painful? Is it black? Is it tonally negative? Is that what it is? Have you come to grips with the fact of it, the isness of your face, your unique being? Is it bad? Does it suck? Does life suck? Fuck, man, it's just irritating listening to this same dogmatic, planular set of premises and argumentation that echoes off of this being reiterated based on Gary finding this one thing that he is good at and doing nothing but, in his late adulthood, perpetuating it. And yet, in light and in surrounded argumentation by educated minds that are quite sophisticated and entangled, these are entangled philosophies that Luddite and Conference Report, Zombie, and whomever else I'm missing here brings about. So okay, these premises have been plucked at. Imposition is another one. Yeah, I mean, I had brought that about, that the notion of smuggling in suffering into the notion of procreation is imposing, or the notion of pushing, the very movement of pushing, anti-natalists will say, to put it in the world is imposing. You're snapping your fingers and you're bringing another sentient being. You imposed it. You caused it. What would you say to your children if they don't like their life? You are. You are a matter of course. You are a matter of circumstance. You are a matter of cause and effect. You know, the anti-natalists will, oh, you're also a matter of will. Let's focus on the will. Let's focus on the intent of the parent. But the whole point here, the whole point is that the notion that one is imposed or that procreation is imposing, I brought up the light example. When one turns on a light switch, it is their will that has the light hitting the wall. It was their cause that has the light hitting the wall. But from the light bulb to the wall, the light did not impose through the darkness and then hit the wall. One can say it imposed poetically, but there is no suffering or burden. No suffering nor burden on the darkness, nor the wall, by the light hitting it. That is what procreation is. So this notion, that's why I'm like, use another word. Use another term that does not have a connotative value, like the word parasite. Just saying you're a parasite. You're an asshole. The connotation of saying these things, you know, an abstract additional meaning that does not have to be there is being utilized. And so this whole idea, and like I said, it started with Benatar and then it's perpetrated by Gary and then it's echoed by all these others. At least that's how I see this whole thing kind of unfolding. So anyway, there's the isness of being that separates pain from badness. One does not have to see value in their experience where they find their light. One does not have to see, it's kind of like a convention, like flipping the globe upside down. Ooh, spooky, we flipped the globe upside down. No way can we have dark people land be above white people land. No way. The convention is that Euro is above all the other ones, and that must remain. And so there's this, the same way value is valued, that black is somehow worse than lightness, that pain is somehow, as opposed to just something we experience and go through, it is worse than pleasure. These are still conventions. They're reactions as well. I'm not in denial of the argument. I'm making it voluminous. But it is very much like a convention of flipping the globe upside down, and how it would be irritating to view the North Star not as up top. We believe North is up top. Once again, another convention, another historic notion that we're imbued upon our culture and our language and the way we see the world. And yet, it doesn't have to be done that way. Individuals do not have to fall in accord with it. They do not have to fall in accord with it. They do not have to agree that that is the way it is. That is a movement of the grain. So, what Gary is doing is he's moving with the grain with all of his argument in terms of rationality, lest the very argument itself crosses the grain. Live through rationality and logic and all of these reasons to end suffering in the world, and yet stop everything that ever was a definition of humanity through the perpetuation of humanity and rip right through a negative. Cross the grain at that point. That's the one thing where Gary will cross the grain, right? All argumentation requires a bit of grain crossing or a bit of not going with the flow. Reconsideration. So he wants his cake, need it too. He wants to put the umbrella of logic and rationality there. Okay, anyway, let me back up a little bit. The justification for having children is found outside of logic. Logic is a subset of language. Once again, a dichotomy, language and logic. Is logic a type of language, or is language a type of logic? Well, if you see the natural order and shape of things, one might say, well, our minds are simply mapping the way acorn or a snail's shell wraps, and hence we're logical. We're all part of this natural form, and that logic is just there. But no, logic is a subset of language, and that's the contention here. You can't have a set that includes a set of itself, logically. You can't take set theory and say logic is a type of logic. The fact of us being logical is not based on logic. It's based on something outside of logic, something greater than logic, which is the language capability of at all. The fact that we can speak recursively. And I argued historically against recursive natures as even being a necessary fact of human language. The Piraha already show that there is not a necessary fact of recursivity in the language. Logic is not necessarily a fact of all human languages, and this goes against Chomsky. But it goes with Everett's philosophy and with the investigators of the Piraha. Anyway, that's a side note. The point is that where logic is found, it is found within the realm of language. Justification for procreation. We procreated long before we had language. We procreate long after we have logic. And the justification for procreation is not found within logic, within reason. It's found outside of it. It's found somewhere else out in the voluminous consciousnesses, the invariable or ultimately uniquely variable consciousnesses that are out there existing find justification for procreation. The anti-natalists will say, this is all but desire and an I want or I need. So be it if that is the case. But like I said, in my world, the biology, the act, I have a biological drive to procreate. Maybe it's biblical. Maybe I believe the book of life, there will be your hand, and those who have life will do this, and know a man by his fruits. And by fruits, I don't mean the fruits of his labor, but the fruits of his being, of his biology, the fruits. Have fruit, multiply, these types of things. So that you could say, my notion is biblically historic, culturally imbued, historically. But what I'm trying to say is that I do not go out to get laid. I'm going out to make baby. I'm going out to procreate. As a matter of fact, in terms of suffering, to be a more trite argument, I will say, I suffer because I don't have children. I suffer more. I suffer as much as somebody who is fighting with suicide because I don't have children. I'm trying to eliminate suffering. The reason to have children is to eliminate suffering. That is my argument to have children. It's my justification. Okay, here's another one. I was saying before, teleologic bloodlines. The reason to have kids is a teleologic bloodline. Okay, what's a teleologic bloodline? Well, teleology is the end. It's the end point. It's the forecasting of an end. To see how far one's bloodline can go. Now I'll say the justification for having kids is non-teleologic idealism. It's to open up the notion of ending one's bloodline of self and expand it into the future. Once again, separating the notion of suffering or of risk, a risk equation. You can be stuck in the plane of saying you risk all these things, but once again I say you can have any type of child any type of being, anything that is. And granted, you know, some people have abortions because their kids have Down syndrome or because they're not developing right or all sorts of number of medical things, but there's still kids that are born that they are here. And their fact of being here is an isness. They are here. They are present. They are existing. The job of the culture, even through race, like race history, NAACP, arguing against, you know, like Halloween costumes of the KKK, or, you know, what was one I recently saw? A depiction of a UCLA professor as a gorilla. He's suing UCLA. It's this notion of trying to change the imbued culture slowly and surely, like from Old English to Middle English to New English. We're changing, we're manifesting away from slavery, away from difference, to get to character, to get to one's character. I'm on heavy narcotics right now, and I'm about to take a nap. See, I live on heavy narcotics because I am in pain 24/7. And yet I still don't think life suck. Life isn't suck. Life isn't equivalent to suck. So this notion, truth upon reiteration, truth because I said it is the case. That guy's saying imposition, and he's using word gymnastics. He's trying to say there's not imposition. Man, I've made the argument. See, Gary, because of this Canadian woman, is sidestepping and soft-pawing me. And he could actually, for once, again, play a long video. Make 5 fucking videos of this video. Telling me how I'm wrong. Telling me how this has all been gone through. Anyway, it's obscene. The point is life is not suck. Life is an expansive, voluminous experience no matter what level and types of valuation. It's kind of like anti-natalism has hijacked philosophy on YouTube amongst this very nice group. They're all trying to get over this bump and this reiterated, and all the anti-natalists kind of like trolls, but we're kind of stuck on it because we kind of like it as a planular truth, as a dogmatic truth, and we're fidgeting around it. You know, and I even play, well, if you can't beat them, you don't want to join them, might as well make money off them. Right? So that's what the fuck to do. Well, why would you take a pill if pain wasn't bad? You're trying to get away from that experience. No, I've gotten off my pills. I've sat in that. I move faster this way. It's got its change of circumstances. It doesn't end all the pain. It doesn't stop. It doesn't give me all this pleasure. Okay, anyway, I digress. Point here is if you take away imposition, you find justification outside of logic that is still real human considerable justification. You separate pain from badness. You see what dichotomies, the stigma of culture and suicide, and anti-natalist holds on to that. Pain and badness. Pinch those together, make certain that dichotomy is pinched together. They make certain to separate psychology from biology in all cases, to make certain that this wanting to have children is a psychological affair and not a biological thrust found throughout one's psychology. The psychology is a manifestation of one's biology. Especially with the deterministic arguments. This notion like, oh, I believe in a deterministic universe, so it's my job to throw something in the way that's going to change other people's minds. So this notion that Gary puts on, this I'm trying to prevent another me from happening, you know, not a real him in kind of a reincarnated self, but somebody that finds a disgust at life, a suckness of life. Gary does not see that this, you have to separate the two. Let me argue on their behalf that psychology, this is a position of his mental state. One could say it's a case of his psychology. One might say he's determined to have it. But I say this can be adjusted. This can be maneuvered. Some people are mutable and other people are cardinal. Cardinal being static, mutable being changeable. Gary might be more cardinal than mutable. So be it. But the point is that mutability can occur. Changeability can occur. And it does occur in small steps. You see everybody change, including Gary, including the arguments, including everything is changed because everything is in a form of animation. So the dogmas even break down. The responses to the dogmas even break down. But the whole point here is this, is that this notion of trying to save something from being that might look similar, be in common with, have angst towards the world, to stop that from being, that my job is to stop that to being, that is to project and reflect off of somebody else, a psychology that is not their own, and relay, try to extrapolate what that mind, what that being, what that different being might be like that is similar, and trying to put an end to it. You know, this is why a long time ago I argued Gary is trying to eradicate logic from the universe. And my argument went something like, well, humans have language. Language is a part of logic. If we got rid of all humans, we'll get rid of all logic. Gary's trying to get rid of all logic in the universe. Oh, well, he didn't like that. No. For some reason, then all of a sudden he's going to, as an episteme, an epistemology, or a logical argument, he'll say, no, logic is something that we discover. It is not something that we invent. So there's that invention, discover argumentation. So once again, just note, whoever's viewing this, the anti-natalist premises are a decision to fall through a series of dichotomies on a particular side and to stop another particular side. Okay, the notion of God. I'm a theist. I personally have experienced things I don't believe if anyone else ever saw them that they could explain. And yes, one of them was shared by a close love of mine at the time. And so I don't feel like I'm out of my mind. I mean, I am out of my mind. But the point is I feel like this whole thing is a bit fake. And it's kind of like a metaphor of the Matrix. That's my personal experience. But like I said, for the sake of argument, I argue these things. But nevertheless, now, personally, coming from atheism, from these grounded notions, I have had to use the best of my reason and rationality and watch it break and fracture and turn into iron dust and fall to the ground, and then pull the iron dust off the ground as a magnet and paste back together my psychology as some mosaic, trying to, having lost my internal monologue, having to re-find my own history that I forgot, and slowly allowing it to come back together, slowly allowing this being that is me to re-reflect on its history through its own breakage, its own slaughter, physically, psychologically, mentally, biologically. I've damaged myself biologically, I'm sure. Anyway, a moral of the story is now I see something upward and beyond all of this, something beyond this rational ground. And that has caused me to grant outwardness to something I call a higher power, something that intersects and influences people, me specifically, but if one wants to talk about human psychology and potentialities, there's plenty of it on the tubes. You can look at from old world religions and paganisms and Wiccanisms to Masonic traditions to religions to people's experience and claims of how do you have a relationship with God? I would say yes. Do you know the Holy Ghost? I would say yes. Have you seen these things? I would say yeah. The whole point is I've granted myself into a theism, into a higher power, and now I've had to pull myself away from the base standard ground. And so I don't try to bring that into conversation, especially when I'm dealing, the majority of people that I deal with online, since I've set up the dospook channel several years ago, when I was atheist, secular atheists, are secular atheists. And for the most part, they move that way. There are exceptions. Plenty of people out of the woodwork still kind of agree with me, or they kind of grant something else, something more. So I am finding difference, and I am finding intersections with the theos. Episteme here, the theos there, the ground here, the material here, the spiritual there. Anyway, my point in bringing up this whole theos, theological thing, is that all the times that I'm saying, for the sake of argument, I will argue this way, I am granting the argument for a grounded, rational, secular atheist to consider. That's where I'm coming from. Even yet personally, interpersonally, I'm more voluminous than that. My chakras are lit from well above me to well below me and well around and so forth. It goes beyond a sense of self. Anyway, the point, I shouldn't say that beyond the sense of self, just beyond the sense of a rational ground. Beyond the sense of that ground itself. But my point in saying that is that you can mirror all of these things and still find a space to go through. And so my argument is the Ubermensch, that Gary's so against this notion of Nietzsche, and he thinks that, you know, that Nietzsche is limited and that he didn't find a value equation. You know, the value equation is it's a cul-de-sac. You're in a cul-de-sac in a huge, huge neighborhood in a huge, huge city. And you're in a cul-de-sac, Gary. Nietzsche's Overman's is not, it's yanking, it's pulling, it's putting these historic godheads above us. It's analyzing the inheritance of Jesus in our culture, our historic culture, and whatnot. It's an analysis of Jewish people. It's an analysis of women from this man, from this person, from this unique individual. It's appealing, but to say he is limited or that he did not find his value equation, that you found his value equation, okay, so be it. You have your cul-de-sac, you have your planular argument, you have your dogma, your crypto-religion, but do you have mutability and a voluminous circumstance? Are you willing to chase, knock on doors, open, follow, expand before you get even older? I mean, I find all these very pragmatic, practical people. I mean, the majority of people are. The majority of people have not gone through what I've gone through. I know that. I thought that they were all playing a joke on me at one time, and that they all had, but they're all lying to me. I had to go through that. Anyway, I'm not trying to make this about me. I'm still trying to say, because I like poodlesusan, I've just summed up that you are insane, and that's fine because I've already got that. But what about everything that I've said? What about these conditions? What about these facts? And what about all these people that are different? I was going to say, anti-natalism has kind of hijacked all these minds that probably actually would rather wax in more of these voluminous areas. But there's this nagging gravity that is the anti-natalist. This video might come to an end now. And I think we all find some appeal to it. But we want to see it and solve it and surround it and encompass it and then envelope it, fold it out, fold it outward. Move beyond, carry on to the next. What is the next argument? What else could there possibly be? Except for my argument, except for this argument, except for this. Huh? 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 Someone at the party beating on a goddamn drum in the party. Rah, 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 rah. Everyone hears it. What do we do about that guy beating the drum? Does that guy not know he's just beating that damn drum, causing that? Quiet down. This is why you should quiet down. You're not seeing this. You should see it this way. Consider singing it. Consider putting down the drum. Yeah, you're good at your drum, but you're playing a drum. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Continue doing what you're doing. So be it. Oh. Anyway, I guess the moral of my story is is that, you know, I said deterministic one, you're just like my misery and me. You're just echoing Gary, and some Fu Young Jin, somebody else said, no, he's not. That's the base structure. That's the base argument of anti-natalism. And we're just following that blah, blah, blah. It's not. No, it's right here. John Yin. No, he isn't like my Israel me. He isn't like Gary. He is echoing the thoughts of anti-natalist movement in general, which is a collective. These thoughts do not begin and end with Mendham. Get over it. And I'm thinking, well, if everybody is actually free, then they're going to bring in, like my misery me now, Evelyn, their own humanness to it, and they can let it go. They will finally let it go. But until they let it go, it's kind of like deterministic one. He's just, I mean, I grant poodlesusan's got her mind and her psychology in her way, and that she's more of being in agreement. The deterministic one is a pure, like a solid echo. And it's sick. It's like my misery and me used to be. And he might not see it this way because, oh, I'm just being thoughtful and rational, and therefore it must be like this. It's just, it's a joke that this man is at that age and he is so in lockstep with somebody else. He hasn't found a purity of self and freedom throughout it because he's too locked under law, too locked under argumentation, too locked under supposed notions of reasonability and logic. It's you know, I'm not the smartest guy in the world by any means, by any stretch, but it's interesting to see somebody like you're seeing a little globe. Like, oh, there's a little globe floating in space right there, or it's a dot right there, and boy, is that dot chasing this dot. I used to chase. I used to follow. I know what it's like. I know what it's like to mimic so closely that my identity becomes what it is I'm mimicking. I know what that's like. See how people are locked down or they're trained, and it doesn't even seem like a loving relationship. I can understand mimicking and succumbing to people that you love and being congruous with them and their thoughts and their ways and not crossing the grain so much. Sharing. I mean, Gary's an alone man. I'm an alone man. But sharing life with other people, you know, it's very interesting. That's very interesting. Not mimicking them, not lockstepping with them necessarily, but agreeing with it, being agreeable, moving down the same river, but paddling differently on your side of the boat. Anyway, I'm not certain where else I'm going to go with this. I think I've said an hour plus worth of piece here, and I keep saying it because at one point I realized a fact, and that fact was that everything can be deconstructed. All works and words and things can be altered, viewed, seen from another vantage point, torn to shreds, ripped apart, disagreed with. And so this notion, this truth capture device, very much like, I had my run-in with the Mormons and their book, and I was like, wow, this is a heavy, heavy truth capture device, just like a lot of religions are, and just like Gary is. It's a truth capture technique of being. And so it's interesting to immediately know that it's okay to oppose that, because your instinct, your sense of smell, tells you something is just off. And so it's also interesting to think about, deterministicone. He's really a casual guy. He's kind of polite, but he also has a child. And so I think of him, and I think of, what's her name that lives in Taiwan? Boo Boo, right? Both of them have kids, but now they're anti-natalists, right? They're of a different tonality because they are parents. They get it. We made our mistake already, and then we get to deny it in retrospect, and then align and try to stop this, right? I even thought Zombie Picture Show, he's had a kid, so the Malthusian anti-natalist, that's kind of agree. He has one kid, had two, but has one. Kind of the philosophy agreeing with the facts of one's life. But it's funny to see anti-natalists that have already had kids. But then you get somebody like poodlesusan and Gary, and they're like me in a certain way, because they're alone and childless, and they're ripped. They got scars on their being. They've gone through some form of fucking hell and damage and crises. It's just that, I'm different from them also, but there's so many single people. Some people have kids, some people don't have kids, but a lot of people that don't have kids, a lot of them are either suffering hellishly, or they're kind of cosmopolitan. They're kind of open and well-rounded and well-balanced in their life. But there's something that comes along eventually with realizing you're at a time of your life that you can't have kids, or that you won't have kids, or that you don't want to have kids. And the notion of family and group and unity, meaning through relationships, falls to the wayside. And so there's all of these lonely, alone people that suffer through neuroses after neuroses, and they're stacked on it, and then they believe through therapy or through medication. They buy into the medical notions. Whatever the current dominant paradigm is, they succumb to that, and they agree with that, or they reject it. They don't put it forth, They deny, smoking's not bad, blah, 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 and that's fine. It's just apparent that everybody's different in terms of, what it is they believe, how it is they act, what it is they bring close to themselves, what they put far from themselves, bond with, separate from. It's just a cacophony of voluminous difference. And I guess out of that, for the anti-natalist mind, it's nice to find common interest and to find a rationality and boil it down and make a diamond out of it and say, that's our rock-solid fucking diamond. We agree with this. God damn. But at the same time, it's nice to understand anything. So it's my job to agree with and get in the shoes of. I've agreed fully. Seen the field of Gary's argument, agreed fully with it. Almost to the point where I'm like, God, I am an anti-natalist. I am in agreement with Gary. And then I was like, God, that nagging other side of me just woke up again. And realized, just like anything else, any other habit, this is just a habit of mind. To agree with it is a habit of mind. And then to agree with my higher sense of self, sense of well-being, sense of desire and want and my spirit's direction, flow, to find that, not constipated, not caught in a cul-de-sac. In a sense of release, I was like, of course, this is nonsense, guised as sense. And look at the minds and the people that are backing this. It was like Nietzsche. Oh, Nietzsche was great, but then, oh no, look at the man. Make certain you always read the biography or the biographies or autobiographies of people that are your heroes, because, you know, to find out the person behind whatever is, you know, it's a telling story. You know, it creates a more voluminous vision. And so my challenge to Gary is to recognize, kind of like I do art. I'm passionate about art. It's like I won't let it go, but I tease myself with the idea of just stop it, just end it, just stop this. You know, the challenges to Gary, guy, you got all these videos and all these things. So my say is let it go or market it. Push it out. Start putting your money and gathering money to generate a marketplace to really explode this. But like I said before, this is, you know, anti-natalism should be taught in a 401 class because it's a 301 level. You get to the 401 level, then you're going to get into deconstructionism, theories of language. Your spirituality might be more emboldened, or maybe not. Maybe not, but your intellect will definitely be emboldened. And then one can see this as a truth capture device that's entangled through upholding a certain set of binaries, maintaining a certain set of binaries. And that's really all that maintains this argumentation and this premises. You know, we have Gary as a biological man living in a shit shack way out in Jersey, arguing and yelling, and granted he's the wild, crazy man on the hill that's living alone, and he makes some sort of sense, and there's a Beatles song that says, you know, pay attention to this guy, or, you know, thus struck Zarathustra walking, you know, down his mountain. You know, it's like, oh, is that Gary looking at all this? And then like he's in argumentation. It's just, it's almost like, how long can one hold on to something? I guess they just, you know, people were imbued with this notion, you know, that you got to hold on, never ever give up, just keep maintaining, you know. Just don't stop what you're doing. You are what you do. You are what you know, and you are what you do. You know, as if that is actually the case. I mean, that's your position in society, what it is you do, what it is you say. And I guess what you know is what you are, but what you feel and how you sit and where you sit and what thoughts you have that are not knowledge-based thoughts, not a knowing in the gnosis sense, but in a more experiential thought, that is also who you are. And so the challenge to Gary is either ramp it up and get serious, get business-like with it. I mean, I didn't put this fucking jacket on for nothing. Or, you know, let it go. Release, empty it. There's already a library of videos that people can go through. You've covered supposedly all the argumentation, even though I wish you would go through this one and put it on the camera. Put it on the screen and do that little rotation thing you do and dissect every little one of my sentences and have an opinion about it. And don't let Canada get in your head about what can and can't be done. You know, the night that I jumped, there was a ghost head, very, very white, and I told her, I said, and it looked like Gary. I didn't say it was Gary's ghost, but in her mind, you had gotten into my head, and you had caused this hell. And so I, being me, wafting and moving very mutably, denied it. Then I succumbed to it, and I agreed with it, and then I pulled away, and I thought, no, that's not what I experienced, and I saw through her psychology, and then her, and anyway, point is, enjoy the cigarettes if you get them. You know, I quit. keep thinking about getting back on them again. But anyway, here I am going on an hour and 15 minutes. I guess in closing, I want to say I still feel, you know, as much shit, bullying or bullshit. I mean, even on my channel, I say something like, this is full of absurd arguments. This channel is about absurd arguments. They're still my arguments. They're still things that I think, things that I would ground on, things that I hold deeply. And some of it's wafty, horseshit, bullshitting fun. It's a gregariousness. But ultimately, I am still human and humane, and I relate to people with a grand sense of empathy. And like, I saw poodlesusan's most recent video, and she was just on the verge of tears, and she, you know, I'm just like, oh my God, this poor woman, and how could I have, you know, made a video even, you know, projecting a notion of negativity towards her, when I'm like, gosh, she's, you know, she's a very, you know, fragile being and a very sensitive being, and she's going through her thing. And even I give some shit towards determinists. Here's another human who I probably on a day-to-day basis would get along with just fine and very well. Even Gary, I mean, right when I intersected Gary, originally he sat down on his couch, he complimented me, he called me very, very smart, he wished I had more video views. And I was thinking, God, he's very brotherly, and he's very, you know, self-conscious and whatnot. But, you know, a lot of people, and I, you know, I think, you know, even Luddite Returns, he said, yeah, I feel a spiritual connection with Gary, you know, but he also called me Moses, like I was freeing the people from bondage. And but the whole point is that there's still ultimately a human connection with everybody, no matter how vile or disgusting or wretched or tormented or pained or happy or wealthy or whatnot. I mean, just the human relationship is amazing, and this extends into animals, and even my compassion went into plants, even in organics. I mean, I had a hard time eating a tomato about a month ago because I couldn't believe I was ending the solidity of this fruit. It's like I wanted to be a breatharian. I didn't want to have to go through these things. I didn't want to have to engage the horror, and I was seeing everything down to the very nuance of the horror of life, painting the tonality on existence. I mean, I got to one point where I was sitting in corners for days, pissing myself. It's probably a decade ago, because everything had shattered, and I couldn't move, and I couldn't budge, and I couldn't engage anything, and all I could do was just the slightest bit of breathing, and it was a complete collapse. And I mean, so I moved from these huge, very explosive, very broad, extensive, universally infinite boundaries, so they seem, with all arrows pointing outward, and I've collapsed into this, you know, kind of black hole or neutron explosion. You know, that's my experience, how I have moved through life, and I'm kind of paralleling things out. But that's my closing statement. You know, I think listening to people is fabulous. But I was telling Barklord through a private message, like I just had to kind of let go of the dospook channel and move into something else, because just this group of people and the surrounding and how they echo is so tonally dark. It's manifestly dark, when I realize other people don't move that way. There's a whole lighter degree of people moving in whole different currents, whole different rivers. They're not in this cul-de-sac. They're not in this way. And the very progeneration of dospook was a connection from a lost love mixed with a deconstruction of LDS theology. Being in Utah, this is the case. Anyway, I'm just rambling, but the point is that there was a lot of disdain and regret and negation and opposition that I had gone through, but that has allowed me to be the sophisticated, nuanced, entangled self that is plucking away at these premises to show that yes, this does have a solidity to it and a planular quality that's very solid, but it's not voluminous for all human considerations, nor could it possibly be the case. Only via force and being a red button F-less, would one actually be, the overman of the world that could cause all sentient life to end. So this notion, this desire to do it is just like any other dream. It itself is an idealism, but it's a teleologic idealism. It's the idealism of the end. But procreation, the justification for procreation, non-teleologic idealism. How far, infinitely, can likeness, nestedness, child is nested from the parent, go and continue? It's like counting to infinity, realizing we're humans that speak. We can count to infinity. We've moved throughout time. We're the end product. We're contemporaries with the generations that are alive, and we're in this current. And the continuance of this is fabulous. But if this is the teleologic end, if we are here at the end, and you choose to end this line of being for whatever reason, that so be it. You're not, you've got good company throughout time. But the manifestation of trying to make argumentation against it, I think it's creative and it's unique and it's compelling. I just don't think that it's everything in a wrap, and the people that are reiterating these same premise argumentations are not seeing, they're not even attempting to oppose it. They've simply laid down their weapons and then laid down on the ground and given up and said, that's just the way it is. Until somebody convinces me from the outside it could be any better, I'm just in full agreement. And then occasionally they rise up with argumentation and rage and make their rationalizations, and so be it. Anyway, if anyone wants to go through my video history and pluck out videos, that's fine too. But the point is, I've been here for some very long time, and I think Gary just considers me, like poodlesusan, insane, or because of Canada, he's soft-pawing me, or just simply not serious enough, and he's waxed me as just an acrobat of language, a semantic word player, and not actually saying anything that is truly contentious with the premises or the argumentation. And so be it if that's how you see it, but keep in mind, very, very high IQ people, very, very well-educated people, both with children and without children, are wrapping, inputting, entangling themselves in this argument. And, Gary's doing his best robustly to argue what these are, but he's not seeing what they're saying in all cases, which is fine. He's doing a good job. He is maintaining argumentation, but at the same time, at the one point, it's simply going to come down to him saying, it is this way, agree with me. Coming into life is an imposition, agree with me. Just see it that way. It is imposing, it's by definition, it's imposing. Procreation is imposing. That's what imposing is. And I'm like, no, that's not what imposing is, because imposing means burden. This is not a burden, this is process. So am I right? Do I have a basis to stand on, or is this simply a word game? Is that how it's summed up? I don't believe it is just a word game. I think I'm making cases for things. Is pain always bad? Must it always be seen? Is life always suck? Is justification for all purpose Must it be logical? Must it be reasonable? Can it lie in the exterior, the realm of language that houses logic? Can it do that? Can it be there? Can need be there? Can letting go of the notion of value and loving whatever kind of child that you have, and whether it's mingled or perfect, however it comes out, you just love it? Can you really love your neighbor as yourself? Can we really love humanity in this way? Or do we always have to lay like, oh, the poor guy, he can't walk, or he's got this disability, or he's this shape or this color or this way? Must the distinctions and differences, the dichotomies and distinctions that we are inherited, that is inherently imbued, is that what we must maintain because it's what we inherited? Can we not step out of the boundaries of language? Meaning we can't not talk, we cannot not think. You can lose your internal monologue, you can stop, you can end it, but when you re-engage it, it is still there for engagement, and it's got its course. So, are you going to be a law-abiding citizen until the very end, where, like Gary, your very structure of your argument moves against the human grain, moves against the grain? Will you be like a Mormon and believe in all laws and never break the law and have children and move forward in time that way? Not ever move against the grain, only wholly try to get fully into the interior of the interiors of the grain? Or like other religious people, idealistic, pure people? Can wafting, sick mouth, obscure, gender-bending personalities, can we include all of these differences in civil rights? Can we try to imbue that in culture and make culture move in that way? Can we include the anti-natalist argument as a subset and grant them rights? So all those things. But, once again, can we see real justification that occurs in mind? It's not to say I want or I need. Like I said, in my case, I'm avoiding suffering by having family. What do you say to that? What you say when I say that? Must one maintain the separation of biology and psychology when one talks of motive? Can we say this is a being's motive instead of saying it's a psychology's motive? Is one brave enough to remove the dichotomy and fall into a deconstructive monad before making that? Can one do that? Or is that simply, according to Gary, just gymnastics because he doesn't understand this advanced, I call it advanced, sophisticated philosophy, because he does not want to do that? And Gary grounds himself. He's mechanical, he's argumentation, but he's rational, but he comes from that. He's not, he's extremely bright, but I can't say he's extremely educated. But at the same time, he's made such good quality points, and he's fit right in there where the majority of people just keep ricocheting off of him, and he likes that ricochet, but it's more like a sport. This whole notion of the gladiator war, we're in a gladiator war. Well, is this not Gary participating in the gladiator war? Is he not? I am taking a stand and I am fighting for this in the war. Because I don't really believe we're in a gladiator war, so once again, it's a premises. Life is not a gladiator war. Perhaps capitalism is, perhaps this culture is. But to what extent am I engaged in that? Am I imbued or forced by that to be a part of that? Or no, we're talking more about cannibalism or biology trying to eke out an existence, as Anton said, as Gary uses, we are using now. But it's just interesting to talk about where fights are and to think about the battles that we want to be in and engage in and take on, and where we actually want to spend our time and our mind. And I've been at this for an hour and a half, and I thought about it all day, and I'm like, God, I don't like being in this thought. But then even though I was doing my thing on this other channel, you know, running this business, and entering all these communities on Google Plus, and just feeling brighter and getting some painting done and everything. You know, I had to click on the deterministic one because I was like, God, I just want to listen to something for an hour, and there he was. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to listen to him for an hour. Anyway, okay, here might be the last thing. We're going on an hour and a half. This is a little bit of the art show. This is to show you guys, for the hell of it, three things that I saw. In this light, you're probably only going to see two. Okay, this is the orb, about life size. It's about almost 10 inches by 10 inches. It's a pencil sketch. I haven't painted in about how glowing it was, but that's the orb that I saw move through the living room. When I was compelled through synchronicities and through the internet speaking to me, you know, some people don't see language as speaking to them, or any event speaking to them. They don't turn the arrow of their being to an insanity level where they realize that everything that is being said to them and for them because they are the all-knowing center of the universe. But at one point, it was if the universe was speaking to me and dragging me, and all the symbols and all the facts of my life were leading me physically to another location on the planet, which was up north, towards Canada, actually, where I got turned around. But on my way there, late at night, and God, my documentary guy is going to kill me because I'm making a video saying this, but anyway, was this huge 15 to 25 foot red glowing electric looking jellyfish covering across the highway, complete blackness. There was a mountain on the side, but for the sake of the painting I colored more of the mountain than was really there. It was very, very black, so I'm leaving that in blackness. But that's another thing. And here's the Jacob's ladder going up here. Like I said, I don't consider the Jacob's ladder to be as phenomenally outrageous or supernatural like I consider the orb and this glowing star. Total is 6 experiences. I've got all that. Anyway, that was just all of it. Anyway, what do you say to all of this, Gary, Poodles, Deterministic One, John Yin Young, Saturday night in Gary's argumentation room? Oh, I like Piro, man. He moves through, always considering some other outlet. And like I said, I'm not even considering so many people. Laura Lake moving through, getting her point across, with, you know, moving her competition, her outlook. All of you people mean so much to me, but I also have to let you go at a certain time. Okay, well, I'm off. Another 15 minutes, that pill will be kicking in, and I'll go see about procreating. Bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.